In the case of the Congo, an estimated 8 to 10 million people had died via forced labor and murder under King Leopold of Belgium. Now, the Congolese people would be granted independence, or so they believed. The first elected prime minister was Patrice Lumumba, who had been raised in a mud brick house.
L'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieuse. Je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres. Qui oubliera enfin les fusillades où périrent tant de nos frères, ceux qui ne voulaient plus se soumettre au régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation.
Lumumba's speech, as well as his belief that the Congo's vast mineral wealth should belong to the people who lived there, set off alarm bells in the West. Under the auspices of the UN, the Belgians insisted on retaining a strong military presence in the country. Lumumba traveled to the United States and asked for help.
C'est avec un réel plaisir que je me trouve aujourd'hui aux États-Unis, pays de démocratie et de liberté.
Lumumba's overtures were rejected. Rebuffed by one superpower, he turned to the other. The Soviets gave only token support, but Lumumba's act of defiance was enough to sign his death warrant. After South Africa, the Congo had the largest working class in sub-Saharan Africa. If the Congo achieved real independence, it would pose a direct threat to Western business interests across the continent.
The United States deplores the unilateral action of the Soviet Union in supplying aircraft and other equipment for military purposes to the Congo. The Soviet action, which seems to be motivated entirely by the Soviet Union's political designs in Africa. I must repeat that the United States takes a most serious view of this action by the Soviet Union.
At around the same time as Eisenhower delivered his judgment, articles began appearing in the New York Times, painting Lumumba as a communist and Soviet stooge. They published a fraudulent claim that Lumumba had received $200,000 from the Belgian Communist Party, and without a hint of irony, referred to the first democratically elected leader of the Congo as a dictator. The CIA assassination plot got underway when Sidney Gottlieb, who headed up the psychochemical department of the agency's mind control experiments, carried a vial of poison to the Congo via diplomatic pouch. The plot was abandoned, however, in favor of a hit sponsored by the Belgians in collaboration with Congolese military officials. After being deposed in a coup, Lumumba and two of his associates were tied up and executed. Taking Lumumba's place was Joseph Mobutu. He looted an estimated $4 billion during his time in office. More importantly for the West, he allowed the continued looting of the Congo's vast mineral reserves by Western corporations. Today, the average life expectancy in the Congo is 46 years.
The United States has been engaged in an effort to stop the advance of communism in Central America by doing what we do best, by supporting democracy. Grenada, that tiny little island, it isn't nutmeg that's at stake in the Caribbean. and Central America. It is the United States' national security.
In Grenada, the New Dual movement had attempted to challenge emerging patterns of free market reform. Unemployment had dropped from 49% to 14%. The literacy rate rose to a remarkable 98%. Free healthcare and secondary education were established. Grenadans received scholarships for study abroad.
As I was teaching at Binghamton University, one of my students was actually, graduate students, was from Grenada. And when the revolution took place against the corrupt right-wing authoritarian regime, and the New Dual movement came to power, a student asked me what he should do. I said, go back and work in your government. This is a chance to bring about some of the changes we talk about in our seminars. He went back, and the Grenadian government proceeded to implement advanced social programs, housing programs, cultivating agriculture, and generally opening the country to citizens' participation. Now, the U.S., especially the Reagan administration, was very upset with several things. One, the fact that Grenada was declaring an independent foreign policy, accepted aid from whatever country was offering it, whether it was European Union, Cuba, or what have you. And the fact that the Cubans sent a mission to Grenada to build a major airport became a pretext for Reagan to assert that this airfield was going to be a Soviet base, when in fact the funding for the Cuban construction team came from England. Nevertheless, the social changes and the independent foreign policy provoked the ire of the hardliners in the Reagan administration. The charges that Grenada was a communist base were absolutely rejected. The fact that there was a coup attempt within the Grenadian government to oust the president, Bishop, served as the detonator for the U.S. intervention.
The U.S. goes to war against the Caribbean island of Grenada. Their mission: stop a Cuban-inspired coup and rescue stranded American students.
And we're just hoping that someone would come get us.
But the operation is a logistical nightmare, and troops face a determined enemy.
It's time to die.
Can U.S. forces win in this Cold War confrontation? Next.
The war in Grenada was perhaps the most lopsided conflict in recorded human history. A token force of a few hundred troops was dispersed by what the U.S. military termed Operation Urgent Fury. Unlike Guatemala, Iran, and the Congo, the resources and labor of the tiny nation were insignificant, nor did Grenada offer any real geostrategic import. Why then did they bother?
What we are watching is a four-phased operation. Phase one has been completed, the seizure of Nicaragua. Next is El Salvador, to be followed by Honduras and Guatemala. It's clear and explicit.
There is a Caribbean domino theory that's unfolding.
Well, I wouldn't call it necessarily a domino theory. I would call it a priority target list, a hit list, if you will, for the ultimate takeover of Central America.
The domino theory of communism was used throughout the Cold War as a justification for American military interventions. If one country went socialist, others would inevitably follow. This, in turn, would lead to a worldwide reduction in democracy, human rights, and freedom.
That's the way they operate. And others just parrot the communist line. On the other hand, outright gifts are only one way America aids other nations. As we constantly raise our standard of living, the spin-offs raise standard of other countries.
It is probable that many leaders and foot soldiers accepted the domino theory on its face. The problem is that statistical data proves that in the post-World War II era, the United States was the world's biggest promoter of totalitarian regimes. A study by Lars Schultz found that U.S. aid has tended to flow disproportionately to the Western Hemisphere's relatively egregious violators of fundamental human rights. An additional study by Martha Huggins, conducted in the 1990s, suggested that the more foreign police aid given by the U.S., the more brutal and less democratic the police institutions and their governments become. This seeming contradiction cannot be explained by the domino theory of the Cold War. There is, however, a rational explanation. As Washington moved to overthrow Arbenza's government in Guatemala, State Department officials warned of the new government that its agrarian reform is a powerful propaganda weapon. Its broad social programs of aiding the workers and peasants in a victorious struggle against the upper classes and large foreign enterprises has a strong appeal to the populations of Central American neighbors, where similar conditions prevail.
One of the leading themes of the Cold War has been the domino theory, what critics call the danger of a good example. And they are two different ways of perceiving what amounts to the same thing. Could call it the Mafia doctrine. The Godfather does not tolerate disobedience. It's too dangerous. If some small storekeeper doesn't pay protection money, the Godfather may not care about the money, but he does care about the refusal. And then it's necessary to send his goons to collect the money, but also to make an example.
To my store next Friday, I'll give you the money.
This is Friday, Babu. How many times I gotta tell you?
You keep on calling me Babu. It's Singh, motherfucker.
I'm trying to help you.
Keep on telling me I'm your friend.
Yeah.
You don't even know my fucking name.
You want me to catch a beating? I'm gonna catch a beating if I go back again like last week. See this guy? You see this guy? This guy don't want you to have the money because he wants to come back there and squash your head.
That's a guiding principle of world order. The U.S. has been far and away the dominant power in the post-Second World War era over much of the world, and it wants obedience and conformity. There's a fear, which is called the domino theory, that if one domino falls, one small country falls, it'll topple over the next one, it'll topple over the next one, and pretty soon all the dominoes will fall and you'll be in trouble. So, for example, if you have successful independent development somewhere, others suffering the same problems will ask, okay, why not us? And that's often pretty explicit in the internal record.
The objective was to prevent the dominoes from falling. The loss of Vietnam would trigger the loss of Southeast Asia.
If this little nation goes down the drain and can't maintain her independence, ask yourself what's going to happen to all the other little nations.
The domino theory is always ridiculed after the dominoes don't fall. Take, say, Vietnam, which was successful from the U.S. point of view. If a virus is going to spread contagion, what you do is kill the virus and inoculate the potential targets of the infection. And that's what the U.S. did. Destroyed Vietnam, never become an independent, successful country, modeled anyone, and installed vicious dictators in all the surrounding countries.
The actions of the ruler, President Diem, have been declared autocratic. And perhaps his personal actions are to some degree. But when one realizes the chaos he faced, the complete anarchy that existed there, it's conceivable that autocratic methods within a democratic framework were required to restore order.
The most important, of course, was Indonesia. And in 1965,